I'm so excited to chat with Deborah Fletcher today on the Awakened Feminine podcast. Deborah is the author of Finding Your Hey, a crash course in braving grief and embracing joy. And I know she has so much love and wisdom to share with us today. She's joining me all the way from Toronto in Canada. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
I'm really excited to have you on because we had a conversation maybe a couple of weeks ago. And I was like, yeah, we've got so much to cover in your journey. And we'll talk about your book as well. So I'm very excited for our conversation. But before we dive in, I always ask my guest this question, and it is, what is your definition of an awakened feminine?
Oh, it is, I would say it's at that point where you realize just how powerful women are. And it's, I'm older than you by a lot. And I think it came later for my generation. And so my mother, unfortunately, she's 90, and I just don't think she will ever, if she hasn't sort of got it now, she's not going to clue in. But that moment when you realize, oh my gosh, we are just so powerful, right? It's just, it's amazing, like in a beautiful, positive way, obviously.
Yeah, I totally agree. And goosebumps going on. Women are so powerful when they awaken to their truth and who they really are. So, and I think, like you say, your mother's generation, they didn't actually really have that. They probably didn't even talk about what is awakening, what is standing in your truth. It is really much just follow what society wanted in their generation. Yeah. So, Deborah, let's dive in. I want to ask you if you can share with us who you are and why you decided to write your book.
Well, so I had my children late. I was 37. And so, I know it sounds strange, but I hadn't really thought about myself as a mother. I was focused on my career and, all of the other accomplishments that I was sort of achieving in my life, that kind of thing. And then I finally met the person that I wanted to have children with. And so he and I had worked together, and then we met at work, and then very quickly started dating, got married, and actually it was our company Christmas party where we won a $500 door prize. And I guess we were celebrating that night because my doctor says that was the night that my daughters were conceived. So then I had, so my plan, of course we have a plan, right? So when you talk about your life as a journey, mine took this massive detour, as a lot of us do find ourselves doing, right? We find these obstacles or challenges that we encounter, and we end up going in a different direction. And so I had this idea of what motherhood was when I finally decided to embark on it. And I discovered that I was pregnant with twins, which was a complete fluke. They're identical. So I had no idea. It doesn't run in our family. And my goal or my plan had been to have them, do a quick little maternity leave, go back to work, and, continue on my career. Unfortunately, when I had them, my career came to an end as I knew it. My job came to an end because I found out, so they were born early. So they were born at 30 weeks. And we found out when they were 3.5 weeks old that one of them would be, that she was born with disabilities, and she would have challenges that they weren't really certain of at that point. So there was no prognosis until they were about 6 months old. And then they said, okay, we've done some tests, and she is in fact severely disabled. And so during this time, there was a lot to deal with, so there was the grief that we both dealt with, and raising two babies when one of them has these challenges was really a lot more difficult than I thought it would be as well. And sort of like everything I thought about motherhood was like, whoop. She found the world a really challenging place. She was born, and I think she experienced a lot of discomfort. And I think she just found the world really scary because she pretty much cried for the first year of her life, like every waking moment. And I mean, she did finally smile much later than her sister did, and they're identical. So, and when she smiled, I will never forget it. For the first time, it felt like, when the sun comes out after a storm, it was just the most amazing smile I've ever seen. And to this day, I mean, people stop us as we're walking down the street. She's 22 years old, and people stop us and say, oh my gosh, that smile. And so with her challenges, I wasn't able to go back to work because I was, in and out of hospitals and doctor's offices and, multiple times a week. And she was having occupational therapy and physiotherapy in our home 2 to 4 times a week. And so on and on. So I gave up my job and I was a full-time mom. And I eventually, when they were probably 2 or 3, I thought, okay, I can't go back to a full-time 9-to-5 job, but I could use the skills I have, use the sort of the competencies that I developed in my career and become an entrepreneur. So my background was in human resources and training and development. So I started this little human resources consulting company. And I am still to this day a contract facilitator of leadership skills programs. So I was able to sort of take what I did and use it in that way, which I feel very fortunate to be able to do. And also 10 years ago, I became a realtor, which is sort of another one of my passions. And so all of these things allow the flexibility to be able to raise her. And so what's interesting about that little detour that I took, I mean, I took a lot of what my expectations would be about motherhood and just kind of threw it out the window. But there was a lot that I kept too. There's a sort of, very traditional ways of parenting that I sort of still adhered to. It's just that I took on this extra persona and I became an advocate for all kids with disabilities in the school system, because when my daughters were 6, I experienced, probably for the first time, some, I don't know if you would call it ableism, but in this school system, and in particular, we had a principal who did not want my daughter in that school. She costs the school board a lot of money and she presents challenges. So I fought with this principal for about a year and I won. And I went on to not only advocate for my daughter, but I advocate for all kids with disabilities. I've gone into meetings with families and their school principal to sort of use my awakened feminine power and help them with the kids that they have. So through this, 22-year journey, I thought about, okay, why am I, at the end of the day, why am I happy? Because certainly the first few years were really challenging. It was difficult. We were grief stricken. Like I'd never really thought of that word before. But when you are stricken with grief, it saps so much, it saps so much of your energy and just the emotion that it takes. It's really draining. And so as I moved through it, I thought, what am I doing? How is it getting better for me? How am I coping? What am I doing? And so I started to think about it and recognize where in my life I was sort of pulling strategies or best practices even. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but looking at how I end up being this happy, positive, sort of person that finds joy in everything, in my daughters and outside of my daughters. And so as I gathered all of that, and I was looking around and going, okay, I've got friends who have gone through their own detours, things that happened to them that they wouldn't have expected, big and small. And, how do they cope? What is it about them? And so I ended up interviewing 4 of my friends with very different sort of grief stories. And what's interesting is my book became sort of half memoir. And I guess it's a bit of a self-help book in that I sort of found that there were common themes and, almost best practices that ran through all 5 of our stories. But the big story that I pulled from was my dad. This is a long answer to your question, isn't it?
No, keep going. It's so interesting. I don't want to interrupt you because I'm just like, keep going. Tell me more.
I'm sorry.
Keep going.
It's so funny. So one of this is like, he was the poster child. My dad was like the poster child for overcoming hardship with a great attitude. So when he was 46, he had a heart attack, and then 9 days later, he had a stroke. And so I was 22 at the time, and he had the heart attack actually a week before my wedding. And so he wasn't able to be at my wedding. We visited him in the hospital, and he still made it he actually had the heart attack the night of my fiance's bachelor party. And so he still went to the bachelor party. He knew he wasn't feeling well. It wasn't the kind of like boom, drop down kind of heart attack. It was like this, it's called a myocardial infarction. It sort of happens over time. Anyway, so he still went to the bachelor party, and our father-daughter dance song was Bridge Over Troubled Water by Simon and Garfunkel.
Yeah.
And so the DJ said, yeah, so because my dad was, sort of partying and having fun while he was having his heart attack. And he goes, yeah, Deb, he was singing the whole song to me. He said, hey, Warren, remember, it's Bridge Over Troubled Water. And Warren's like, yeah, sure. Yeah, got it. And so he said, my dad said, when you're weary, feeling small. And so Warren's like, yeah, got it. Yeah, it's all set to go. And then he said, my dad just ended up singing the whole song. Because he's a bit of a fun guy. Anyway, And so he went like at midnight that night, he went to the hospital, and they're like, yeah, you're having a heart attack, buddy. You got to stay here. And so they kept him. And so a week later was my wedding. And so he wasn't able to walk me down the aisle or have the father-daughter dance. And so he was recovering really well, though. Like they're like, you're only 46, you're recovering well. But then I went on my honeymoon, and he had a stroke a couple days later. So by the time I got home, and I did not contact my family because this was a long time ago.
Yeah, there was no FaceTime.
No, there was no social media, nothing. So got back home and called the hospital. And with his stroke, he completely lost his speech, and he got it back within about 2 years because he went to speech therapy and everything. But in the sort of short term, he had no speech. And he lost a lot of his memory, and his mental processing was never the same. So his career was over. He never worked again at 46. So the next morning, so we got home late at night, and I called the hospital, and Didn't understand a thing he said. It was just devastating. So the next morning, I went to the hospital to see him. And I don't know how he knew I was walking down the hall towards his room. And he knew how devastated I was and, how devastated I would be when I saw him. So I'm walking down the hall to his room, and he jumped out of his room, like leapt into the hallway, arms outstretched, and just went, "Hey!" like that. And that's the only word I understood him say that entire visit. Like, that's the only word that I could understand to any kind of extent. And so, but that's what he did. Like, he did it for me, obviously, because he was just like, "I'm okay. It's all going to be okay." But I think he also did that for himself. I really do. Like, I think that sort of was his rallying cry. So my book is called Hey, Finding Your Hey, right? It's called Finding Your Hey. And that's what I realized when my girls were, a couple years old. I was thinking, I've got to get me some of that attitude, because he went on to, he lived till he was 82, and he lived his life. He got up every day, shaved, showered, got dressed, put his expensive aftershave on, and just, he was a happy, loving man, and he was still physically able. So he golfed, and then, because it was really, imagine how hard that was for him as a man to have to give up his career, but he maintained this really positive attitude. So that's when I thought, I got to find me some hay. And so that's when I really started to sort of take note of what was going on with me. And some of it happened unconsciously too, because I had these twins. So so I've got these, these beautiful little babies, but eventually their differences really started showing. So my daughter, Quinn, who is the one with disabilities, she can't talk or walk. She is in diapers. She's 22. She can only eat through a feeding tube in her stomach. So she's very disabled. So when they were like little wee girls, and I would see a healthy set of twins, that would be like the worst. I don't know why, but that was my kryptonite. I could see healthy babies everywhere. It didn't matter. But if I saw a healthy set of twins, I was just devastated. So I remember I would walk down the street so I live in a really family-centric neighborhood. So you walk down the street, and there's always like strollers coming and going, right? And if I was pushing them and I saw a double stroller approaching, I would always have to look, right? A lot of the time there would be just siblings, like maybe a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, together in the stroller. Like, I'm sure that's how you wheel yours around. Mm-hmm. And, but the odd time it was twins. And so if I saw that it was twins, I would position this imaginary knife at my heart, right? Mm. And, but if it was a set of like identical twin girls, I just plunged that knife right in. Wow. And it was excruciating. And so this went on for a couple of years. And then one time they were maybe 3, I think. So, I'm out, nice sunny day. I'm pushing them down the sidewalk in their stroller, and I see this double stroller approaching, and this voice in my head just said, "Hey, just don't look." And it was my voice, and I didn't look. And there was no pain. There was no knife, no pain. And so I kind of I smiled. Like, I remember, I think I said, like, I think I laughed. Like, I was just like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I have the power to do this. And so that was this huge wake-up call for me, because I think we all naturally do that, like we poke a sore tooth with our tongue, or we want to, search social media for our ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend. Like, we do these things to ourselves. And so when I had that realization, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like it changed my life because I realized that I've always had control. I just didn't understand how to use it. But I have the ability to focus on those things that will not do me harm. I can focus on those things that will bring me joy and gratitude and happiness. And so that was really powerful for me. So I started sort of noticing those little, like those moments and just what, got me through a lot of it. And you can probably tell a lot of where I get my hey from is through humor, right? And finding the funny in situations. Like, honestly, our lives can be absolutely ridiculous. Like it's just, but we find the humor, we laugh at her, we laugh with her, but we laugh at the situations that she gets us into, right? So that's when I decided to sort of think about writing this memoir more as a something to for them, really. I mean, it is all for them. But then I thought, you know what, this could be something that other people could read it and go, wow, you know what, like I've been there, I've done that, and or hey, I might try that sometime. Or so when I interviewed my friends, it was it felt really right that there was a lot that was coming out that I thought, this is interesting stuff. And yeah, so
wow.
I'm thinking, not only for my daughters, my mom may buy a copy too. So there you go, 3 copies.
Yeah.
Just sold.
I'll buy a coffee. Let's go 4.
4.
Wow. What an extraordinary journey you had. And just, wow, I just can't even imagine everything that you've gone through to be this beautiful human being that you are, because you've just got this beautiful energy, this shine about you. Yeah. And I remember when we talked before a few weeks ago, I was like, you are just amazing, so much joy that you just exude. So I'm like getting a bit teary because your story is so touching. But
I'm inspired by my girls for sure.
Yeah.
And I know, I'm sure you can say the same thing about your kids, right?
Yeah.
It's just, you look at these little humans and you think, oh my gosh, like I can't believe how much they teach us, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it amazing?
I think they teach us more than anything. They are your mirror. They are your teacher. They are really, truly just there to teach you really how to be more loving and compassionate towards others and to yourself. Because like you said, when you become a mum, I mean, even with healthy children, all the expectations go out the door. Like, I'm going to just cook them organic food. I'm going to cook every night for them. Nah, that ain't happening. Those right. kind of things, right? And I know. You had kids, you're the best parent because you're like, no iPad, no junk food, no, but when you become a parent, you're like, oh, okay, I get it.
That's right.
And to have to, bring up a child with disabilities and also have a healthy child, and seeing that, the contrast,
Yes.
And it's really just really playing on your light and your shadow. It's just like, okay, I've got this healthy child, I've got this disabled child. Okay, how do I even navigate that?
It really made it interesting to have this experience and have twins, because I've since met all kinds of families that are like us, and, we become friends, of course, right? It's a great community.
Yeah.
But I don't think I'm not really close with another family that did it with twins that had this experience. And because they're identical too. So at every milestone. So when Emma, my other daughter, took her first steps, I will never forget those first steps because she walked into my arms, which is the most happy, joyful moment ever. And I picked her up and I was so happy for her. And then immediately I just was so absolutely shattered that her sister couldn't walk. And I remember I literally handed her to her dad, ran into the kitchen, had a, 2.5 minute cry, came back in and started celebrating again. But I just had that. And so I had a lot of split moments like that, mostly in the first, I'm going to say that the first 4 or 5 years, all those milestones. And then I eventually got a handle on it. And I started to prepare myself for those moments. And it's almost like, we can prepare ourselves. It's almost like adapting to change. I used to teach this leadership program to managers, executives, and it was called Adapting to Change. And it was about how when we go through transitions in the workplace, there has to be, as a leader, you have to demonstrate empathy and you have to, do all of these things and I thought, okay, like, how can I apply that to my life? Right. So, in terms of the big things that I knew were coming, I could prepare for them. So the biggest one for me was when Emma went away to university, and she went, Canada. So we live in Toronto, and she went to university in Halifax, Nova Scotia, 1,800 kilometers away. So I thought, oh my gosh. And of course, her sister couldn't go away. And so it was like this double whammy of absolute grief that you feel as a parent. And so I thought, okay, like the year before, I thought I got to get prepared for this. Like I can't just be devastated. So I'm the one that I took her to all of the universities. Like I took her on a tour. We went to all like the local universities, and then we went on this driving trip. Her sister was at summer camp, and we went on this driving trip to New Brunswick, Quebec, New Brunswick, and then finally to Nova Scotia, and she chose Dalhousie. So it was nice to have that sort of experience with her and to walk the campus that she would be walking, a year from now. So that I did that, and I just mentally prepared myself, and then the week before she went, I went with just her to Chicago for a night to take her to see Hamilton.
Oh, nice.
And this is really special because, as you can imagine, 99.9% of my parenting time has been taken up by her sister. So to have these one-on-one times are actually very rare. But so I did that. And then, of course, now it's great that we've got FaceTime and WhatsApp and everything else to keep connected. And so I just mentally prepared myself so that, yes, it was still sad when she went, and we all went to Halifax to drop her off at Dalhousie. Like we, her sister and her dad and I all went. And so we stayed for a few days with her there. And eventually she said, okay, I gotta go now. Yeah. Okay, you guys have to fly away now. So, and it was, it's devastating. Like there's no other way but I was more prepared for it. You know what I mean? So, but I didn't know enough to do that. Like I would never have thought to sort of picture in my mind, okay, what are Emma's first steps going to look like? What's it going to feel like? How can I get my mindset in the right place? Like I didn't have any of that back then. Like I was just flying by the seat of my pants, right?
Yeah.
So now, I've had, these are life skills that I've learned that I can apply in any situation, not just with my children. So I've really learned a lot from just my experience with them.
Yeah,
for sure.
Definitely. And so many beautiful lessons that you've learned through your journey, as much as, there's the pain, but there's a joy, that goes with it as well. this kind of popped into my head as you were talking, and you did just mention it. Like you have Emma, who your time is taken up by Quinn. So, how was your relationship with Emma? Because obviously, as a young child, it's very hard to understand why mum is not being able to spend as much time, even though they might be, they have that understanding, but it's not a full understanding when they're little. So how did you navigate being able to be present with Emma and build that relationship while spending most of your time with Quinn?
I didn't do a very good job. I can tell you that right now. It was actually impossible. So I needed so much help. So my parents would come one day a week, and I had people that had to come in and help me because neither of them could breastfeed. So Quinn didn't have the coordination to do it. And Emma, when she was born, she was only 2.5 pounds. So she needed this liquid fat, basically this additive added to my breast milk, and for months. So I pumped the whole time, for however long I pumped, 8 months or whatever it was. And they were bottle fed with my breast milk for that long because neither of them. And so I would bottle feed Quinn because she would only let me hold her for the first year of her life.
Yeah.
And so their dad was feeding Emma. So Emma and her dad bonded. And I didn't bond with Emma. And so she and I didn't really get to know each other until she was about 10 years old, which is very sad. Yeah. And I was something that I struggled with emotionally all that time, but there was logistically nothing I could do.
Yeah.
Because those, as you know, those first few years, so once she was 4 or 5, it was done, and it was only because, so our marriage broke down, and which happens. And so we separated when the girls were 10. And so it was when she was with, it was just me and her sister and I, that she and I truly got to know each other. And I have to say, she is just probably the most amazing human being I've ever met, as is her sister. But so she and I have just an amazing relationship. It's like, I can't even describe it.
Yeah.
She has, so she now knows me, I know her, and she is just this fantastic human being. So yeah, I say to her dad, I said, it's almost like she got the best of you and the best of me and didn't get our crappy parts. Like, it's like, how did that happen? Right.
Yeah.
all of our bad qualities. But so yeah, it is really challenging. And when I look back on it, I would have done things differently. But I mean, at the time, there was just, I was, as you know, there is such a thing as mummy brain. And there's also scientifically proven grief brain. So I was suffering from both that first year. I'm so happy that I was lucky enough to not have any kind of postpartum depression. So, I mean, I was managing it and I was walking around like probably nobody would have even known. But I was just barely hanging on, as you can imagine. I couldn't brush my teeth until their dad got home at the end of the day. It was really hard. And, Quinn, the only way she could go in a stroller on a walk was if she was sleeping, because if she wasn't sleeping, she had to be in my arms. So she would just absolutely scream the whole time. So, I would be out and about, and there would be other sort of young moms sitting in a cafe with their sleeping 7-month-old, beside them. I could never do that. So it was a really, really isolating time as well.
Yeah.
And I just think that I had to learn so much about myself, as well as, all of the medical jargon that I now know. But I was learning about me as well as learning about them, how to do all of this,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. The healthcare system is a minefield if you have no healthcare background. And I was a pharmacist working in a children's hospital. So,
Right.
Being able to navigate it, even as I've spoken to, friends, pharmacists in the US, and they're like, if you don't know the healthcare system, even as someone who knows the healthcare system, it is still a minefield. So to go in with no knowledge and having to navigate it, it's amazing. And like you said, you just had to do it. There was no choice in that moment. Yeah.
Nothing prepares you.
Yeah. I want to ask you also, if you don't mind sharing, is you were saying that, okay, so you had your career and then obviously you couldn't go back to your career and you started becoming an entrepreneur when the girls were around 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And then, doing all the amazing things that you're doing. How did you juggle all these things? And what was going through your head to go, I just need to do something for myself. Like, I just need to start something. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I had not been, I was so unprepared for everything, but I had never thought about how having children would impact my identity, And so, and it's interesting, I think pretty much most of the friends that I interviewed about their sort of grief experience, they all speak about or most of them speak about that sort of, looking in the mirror and not recognizing themselves. Like everything has changed, And so I was not able to work, and that I was devastated because I relied on work, not just, I loved my job, but it was, it was my social network was there, and it's where I got my sense of accomplishment. And I'm an extrovert, so I tend to get energy from other people. So here I was home alone with these 2 little babies who weren't that great at conversation when they were newborns, as you know. So you're kind of like talking to them and they're just staring at you. And so when I decided that I would like to work, it was partly because we needed to work, like we couldn't rely on one salary alone, or at least we didn't want to rely on just one salary, but it was mostly because I needed to do something other than just try and get through each day. Because that was kind of the mode I was in for those first 2 years. And then when they were 2, they started to go to a nursery school, and they would go for 2 hours each morning. And so it was a nursery school that was reverse integration. So it was 3/4 special needs kids, and the other 25% was regular kids. So they took both girls. So it was a really great experience for them and for me. And so at first, I really didn't get a lot done in 2 hours, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
It's like one load of laundry and that's it. But eventually I thought, you know what, maybe I can be more productive and maybe I can do some consulting. And so I started to do that. And then when they were 4, they went to school. And so I was able to work when they were at school. And that was the trade-off that I had to find. I had to, unfortunately, I had to have something that was flexible enough so that if my daughter was sick or she had an appointment or, any kind of therapy, physiotherapy, that kind of thing, that I could be there. And in her entire life, I've taken her to every medical appointment. You know, when she has surgery, I'm sleeping in the hospital with her. Like it's something that you could not have a full-time job and go through this. So I needed to do so. And so the first contract I got I was just chatting with a neighbor one day, and she said, you know what, I work for this architect firm, and we need to get better at doing performance appraisals. And I said, oh, I can help you with that. And so I got to go in, like I got to put like clothes on, you know, like regular clothes, which, I mean, now during COVID, we're all used to sort of not wearing, you know, work clothes. But back then it's like really crazy. So that was when I did my first contract, and I went in and I designed their performance appraisal form, and I did a training session for all of their supervisors. Here's how you deliver performance. And I did that whole thing, and I absolutely loved it. And I felt such an incredible sense of accomplishment. And I thought, this is me again. It's a different me, but it's closer to the old me. And so that's how I started. And so I thought, you know what? And that was kind of like a one-off contract. I thought I could make a living out of this. I could start my own business. And so that's what I did.
Wow. So amazing. You know, I just always find, because when I worked in the children's hospital, I used to meet all the mums who are regularly in the hospital with their children. And it's always the mums with the kids that have, you know, disabilities, that, you know, ongoing that are the most lovely people. You know, whereas the mums that sometimes come in and they're just waiting for something very, you know, just maybe for a scratch. They get very angry. You know, just that loving compassion and to be able to juggle, you know, all the balls, but understanding that, you know, we need to look after our well-being to be able to look after everyone else around us. So yeah, it's beautiful that you recognize that you're like, I need to do something for me. And then did you find that helped you cope better with your day-to-day?
Absolutely. It really, because having that little sort of break from, you know, just, and with Quinn, it's 24 hours a day. Like she's 22, and I set my alarm every night for 3:00 in the morning so I can roll her over. Like it's full on, right? So, but just to have that time where I didn't have to think about anything else, but, you know, something that really was a passion of mine. And that's what I get to do. Yeah. I feel really, really fortunate. To be able to do that. Yeah.
This question popped into my head. Was there ever any resentment that, like, why did this happen to me? Why did I have to go through that?
Yeah, of course. So, you know, I think that when something happens to us, no matter what it is, that's negative, we say, why me? You know, and I was doing kind of a double why me. Like I was saying, why me? And I was saying, why her? And then I finally decided to say, but why not me? Why not her? Bad things happen to good people. Bad things happen to bad people. You know, good things happen to bad people. Like it is just, I mean, it seems pretty random to me. And it's just, you know, like there's no one to blame. There's no one. And so I decided to just say to myself, well, why not? Why wouldn't it be me? Why wouldn't it be her? Right. So, you know, just, you know, get over it kind of thing. Like I literally, and I'm not talking about, you know, 3 days after they were born that I was thinking that, like that's years after, you know, where I was sitting and feeling sorry for myself. and then went, oh my gosh, like, there's just, that's not what's important. It's not important to figure out why.
Yeah.
It just is. And I'm, she's such a blessing. She's just this, she's amazing. Like she can't talk. She's in a wheelchair. But she's a very happy girl. So an hour and a half ago, because it's still Valentine's Day here.
Yes.
An hour and a half ago, this boy that was in her high school class, he's physically able-bodied. He's somewhat developmentally delayed, but they went to the prom together, and they've been very close for about 7 or 8 years. An hour and a half ago, he knocked on the door, and he came in and he said, I have something for Quinn. And so she's like jumping out of her wheelchair, squealing. And it's this little box, a jewelry box. So he has a job. And his job is, like taking the grocery carts in from outside back into the grocery store. Like that's the limit of his. He saved all this money, and it's a necklace, and it's the letter Q in silver. It's beautiful. Like it looks like there's like little diamonds in it.
Yeah.
And like he gives this to her. Like we just put it on her an hour and a half ago, and she is like radiantly happy. And I'm trying not to cry.
Yeah.
It's just these moments happen, and I'm like, okay, this is ridiculous. And they, like that moment on, I don't know, it's just because of who she is and who he is. It's just like this exponentially incredibly beautiful moment.
Yes.
I just can't even,
Yeah. My heart is like bursting right now. That's just such a beautiful story. Thanks for sharing that.
Oh my gosh. It's like it just happened. I'm still going, okay, this is ridiculous. Anyway.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. I'm just looking at the time, and I'm like, I can talk to you all day. And there's so many more questions that I want to ask you, because you've just got so much wisdom there within you, and also
it's because I'm old.
no, not that, but just your life experience with there's people that it doesn't matter how old they are, they haven't lived their life to the fullest, but you have gone through so much in such a short space of time, and being able to be this, happy person that you are, and joyful person, it's just so much to learn from you. But I'm like, there's not much time. There's just a couple of questions that I want to ask you before we wrap up. Yeah. With everything that you have gone through in your life, and going through that grieving process, because your book is about going through the grieving process, what is that one piece of advice that you would give to anyone to be able to get through that hardship, that challenge, whatever it is that they are going through right now?
Well, it's, how they say time heals all wounds. That's partially true. So time gives you some perspective, and time gives you the opportunity to develop your, everything that's around the grief. It's almost like Quinn is somewhat visually impaired. I mean, she can see, but she's somewhat visually impaired. So her hearing is really acute. Like she can, she can hear better than most people I know. And I think that's a common thing where one sense is, anyway. So the way I think about grief is that it's never going to go away. It's not something that you go through stages of grief and then it's gone. You're never over it. But what happens is that the rest of you kind of grows around it and enables you to carry it. So it's, in order to grow the rest of it, it is just love and gratitude and perspective and humor, and think about it as something to carry and something that won't always be so heavy.
That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And such a beautiful way to see it, that you grow around the grief rather than I think a lot of people think, oh, I've done the grieving process. That's gone, but it's, growing around it so that you can carry it. That's beautiful. And love and gratitude always is the best medicine to get through everything. Yeah. And time.
Yes.
Yeah. And there's, as much as we have a finite time, but there is lots of time if you allow yourself if you allow yourself that time, because I think a lot of people just go through life rushing around and they don't give themselves the time. So if they're going through grief, they're not actually going through the grief. They're just distracting themselves from the grief, and it's worse. I don't know if you ever had that where you distract yourself, but then it kind of comes back and it's like, bam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because so about 2 or 3 days ago, I was going to the store, walking down the sidewalk, and a stroller came towards me with identical twin little boys in it. And so I looked at them and I just said, okay, thanks for the reminder, universe. You wouldn't want me to get too cocky here. And it makes me smile, right? It's just such a funny reminder of, so yeah, I don't know. I don't think that answers your question.
But that actually that brings me to something that I had wanted to ask you, but we just kind of go in and everywhere with my questions. But when you were saying that you heard the voice saying that just don't look, it's such a great reminder to people that you always have a choice, right? Whether to keep feeling the pain or to step away from the pain. It's not that it's not going to be painful anymore, but you can reduce the chances of feeling that pain if you choose not to it's like an addiction. I think sometimes where you just like, you're not supposed to stare at your screen all the time, but because it's addiction, but you always have that choice to just go, I'm going to put that phone down.
You do. You do. And I agree. And that just don't look, I've used so many times in my life. And I think that, there's that fine line between choosing to not focus on something that would be painful to denial,
Yes.
So there's that, so I'm really careful about that it's, but I do have a friend of a friend, actually. He lost his wife, and his boys were, I think they were 8, 10, and 14, something like that. And he actually said that the first 2 or 3 years after her death, he was in he called it robot mode, where he wasn't even able to do anything but concentrate on making sure their lives, there was no interruption, their lives were still running smoothly. They were still getting to go to hockey or whatever they were doing. And he said that it wasn't until like years 4 and 5 after her death that he grieved harder, he said, at like her birthday or the anniversary of her death or those kinds of things. He was just a mess. And it's almost like he had delayed the process, through focusing on them. And then when he finally gets to a place where he can allow himself to feel, and he says that he doesn't think he would do it any differently. Like he probably doesn't think he has the ability, go back in time and do it any differently anyway, but it's just the way it happened for him. And so that's an extreme example, but I think a lot of us can get into that trap as well, where we're not really processing it. And that is a huge part of grief, is we really do have to process it. We really do have to, integrate it into our bodies and into our lives, because it's now who we are.
Yeah.
You're never going to be the same person again. Nothing will ever be the same, but that's not necessarily the end of the world,
Such a powerful message. Thank you so much for our conversation today, Deb. Just absolutely love chatting with you. If people, I know your book is actually coming out this week, so very exciting. Can you share with us, if people want to get a copy of your book, where they can find it?
Well, as of probably Friday, which would be the 19th, maybe, whatever it is, 20th?
18th.
18th of February. They should be able to find it on Amazon or in a box in my dining room. Either one. You're more than welcome to come and buy one from me as well.
I would love to go to your dining room and get it from you, but a bit far away for me. One day.
One day. Next time you're here.
Yeah. We'll have to get it on Amazon for now for me. But anyone who's listening and you're in Toronto, you can go to Deb's dining room.
That's right.
Thank you so much for this beautiful conversation and all your love and wisdom. And I've just absolutely really, really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
This is wonderful. You're wonderful.
Oh, thank you. All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.